Welcome to the Building Savvy Bottom Line. I'm your host, Beverly Smyrnas. Our bottom line goal is to ensure that building or remodeling a home is a seamless and enjoyable process, helping builders and their customers better understand each other's challenges, expectations, and industry norms. This episode is brought to you by The Ultimate Guide to Buying and Building in Texas, an online course for Texas newbies or anyone making their first home purchase in Texas. To learn more, visit buildingsavvy.com. Hi, I'm Beverly Smyrnas, and I wanted to welcome to the studio Matthew Motes, who's with the Shackelford Law Firm. Shackelford has offices in Austin, Fort Worth, Dallas, Houston, and New Orleans. Matt is a specialist at construction law. He's written an article for us for our Building Savvy magazine that we publish. It's called Legal Perspective, and we talk about different new laws. He's always got a lot to write about during the legislative section. And so I'll let Matt take it from here and tell us what some of the hot issues are that homeowners specifically need to know about.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Beverly. Thank you for this opportunity to speak a little bit. Obviously, we don't have near enough time to talk about all the issues, but I wanted to kind of go back and take a kind of a historical context of the home building industry here in Texas, in the last 20 years. When I was cutting my teeth starting out with residential construction, I practiced for about 5 years before I got into construction in 1998. The big topic was licensing home builders. That was a popular topic. Most viewers probably don't know that today, even general contractors in Texas are not licensed. So this was a big topic here in Texas. And the legislature passed a bill called the Texas Residential Construction Commission. And part of the bill was to register home builders. It was not quite licensing, but it required builders to register with the state, fill out an application, pay a fee, and then register all of the homes that they built under the TRCC. It was a great idea in concept. There were lots of very good builders who really wanted the licensing requirement because they wanted to make sure that those that they were competing with had the same abilities and qualities that they did, and that they had worked really, really hard to achieve the quality of standards that they had, that they wanted to make sure everybody else could meet those. It was, like I said, it was a great idea and concept, but like a lot of things, when you pass legislation and you create a governmental agency, things don't go quite as well as planned. The TRCC was great for simple, what I would call punch list minor issues. If a homeowner had 10, 15, 20 issues, the state would appoint an inspector to come out to the house, and they would inspect the house, and they would make a determination on which items they thought were valid and which ones weren't. And this was a good neutral third party to tell the builder, you probably need to make these repairs. But on much more complicated issues, such as mold and foundation issues and things like that, it was not as helpful because, quite frankly, the state wasn't paying enough and wouldn't give immunity to these inspectors to go out and do these jobs, so it just wasn't worth it. So ultimately, the bill was sunsetted because all of the parties who had wanted it had decided against it. And ever since then, there have been rumblings here and there about potentially licensing builders, but nothing has quite made it past just discussion stages. So here we are in Texas. Builders are not licensed. General contractors are not licensed. They're licensed in 30 or 40 other states. So it's an interesting dynamic when it comes to what's the building standard of care, because they're not licensed.
Matt, one of the things that I remember that the TRCC actually did too was it had advice and education for home buyers as well. And that went away with the TRCC. So that's one of the things that we're hoping to accomplish with this course, to give potential home buyers a better experience. And also, there's a lot of new people moving to the state. Every state has different laws. So tell us, if a person builds a house and they have a problem building the house, what are their rights and what's a typical course of action in Texas? Or maybe what's the best course of action in Texas? I don't think a lawsuit is.
Right. Well, that's hopefully always the last resort, and so is a demand for arbitration. But in Texas, we have the Residential Construction Liability Act, which governs early attempts to try to resolve a dispute. It sets up an incentivized system for the home builder to look very carefully, inspect, and decide whether or not to offer to repair certain items. And it gives the builder some benefits if they make that offer and it's reasonable. On the same token, it gives the owner the opportunity to really explain to the builder what it is that they're complaining about, encourages them to go and get reasonable evidence of what those problems are, which typically would involve inspectors and experts. And what it really does is it kind of brings the dispute to a head very early on in the process, with the hope that because they're all talking and because they probably have experts from both sides, that they can reach a resolution before they even have to hopefully hire a lawyer. But even if they hire a lawyer, hopefully that's short-lived and the lawyer can help craft a resolution so the parties can stay out of the courthouse, stay out of arbitration, hopefully not even have to go to mediation.
Very good. Let's talk a little bit about builder contracts. What should a person expect to see on the builder contract?
Well, from the homeowner's perspective, they're going to have to understand a few things. Number one, that the devil's in the details with regards to specifications. And I encourage both parties to sit down and talk very specifically about what's going to go in a custom house. If it's a tract home and there's just this is what you're going to get, here's the list of items, it's not as important. But in a custom house, when we're talking about types of tile, SEER ratings of air conditioners, those are some specific examples, the type of AV system that's going to go into the house, down to the type of paint. If you can get into the model numbers and the serial numbers of things that you want in that house, I encourage it, because I've seen many times where people try to start arguing about something and a 15-page spec list is pulled out and the parties go, oh, that's right, that is what we agreed to.
Oh, yeah.
And that cuts both ways, obviously. And as a lawyer, more detailed is better. Then the homeowner is going to need to expect that there's going to be an express detailed warranty that is 30-something pages, and it's something that did come out of the TRCC. The TRCC developed kind of a stock state warranty with some very, very specific specifications for not only the big ticket items like foundations, but for cracks in tile and millwork and sheetrock and those kind of things, those kind of finish out items that are very, very specific, to where anybody with a measuring tape can tell you it's intolerance or it's not. And the warranty has performance standards, and to a certain extent, something that, if you ask me, what would you want to improve in warranties? I'd probably say this is maybe a little more detail on how to fix it. Sometimes it needs to be flexible because there needs to be some different options, but sometimes maybe it should be a little more specific. Then the understanding that folks from other states need to understand is that in Texas, it's really, really hard to promise a completion date, not only because of the weather and the weather changing more and more around here from dry to hot to cold to wet, that makes it difficult to build. But again, with availability of materials, we can loop back and talk about COVID, but we're now in a new world where one week you can get switchgear, the next week you can't. You have to understand that the builder only has a certain amount of control. And with that said, one of the things that I encourage both parties to do is, if there are some long lead items, meaning, it's going to take 6 months. Back to the Port of Los Angeles fiasco, when we had refrigerators sitting on boats sitting off the coast of LA for 6 months, where those had to be ordered early. And if a deposit is necessary, the builders should ask, and the owners should be open to the idea of, hey, if we can put a deposit down, we can guarantee, as much as we can guarantee anything these days, that we can get it delivered on time. So have that discussion with your builder. Ask that question. Do you have any concerns about any long lead items, whether it's air conditioners, refrigerators, roofing tile from Italy, whatever it may be, to kind of cut down on the surprises and the frustration. The other thing that you're going to see in the contracts is going to be a mediation and an arbitration provision. And I could go on forever on arbitration, but it is the way of the world in construction. One of the biggest benefits of arbitration is we're all busy people. We're all trying to schedule when we can do things. Litigation is very, very difficult on scheduling. I just had a case that this is the second time we were on hold for several days until we were told, you're just not going to get reached this time. If you're in arbitration and you have an arbitration hearing and a final date, you will go to arbitration because that arbitrator is only focused on that case during that period of time, has blocked their calendar and is devoted to it. So when an owner is a little bit reticent about wanting to go to arbitration, if they're a very busy person, as we all are, that's one of the huge, huge benefits of arbitration. The other issue is the finality of it. It cuts both ways. Understand that what that arbitrator says, unless there is something really strange that happens in the award or the process, that's going to be the final word. You're not going to spend several years on appeal, going up and down the chain, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars dealing with that, except in very unique situations. So I think those are kind of the basics that I wanted to go over in the contract. If there's anything else you can think of, let me know.
Let's talk about different payment terms that builders commonly use.
There's two ways to do it. There's the cost plus way to do it, which is by far the most preferred after COVID, because what you got during COVID was these extreme spikes in prices. I had the lumber price future index as a saved place on my computer for many years because I was tracking it just like everybody else, and it was extremely volatile. So a lot of builders have just gone to the point where I just do cost plus. I'm not going to do a fixed fee ever again. And what a cost plus is what it really kind of sounds like. It's the cost of the labor and material, work, supplies, plus a builder's fee. Typically, that percentage can run anywhere between 10 and 20%. Cost plus 15 is probably the most common, but I've seen 16, I've seen 17. There's another way that cost plus could be structured, as it could be cost plus a fixed builder's fee. I discourage those kind of things because I don't ever want to mix a cost plus with a fixed fee, because from a contractual standpoint, from a legal standpoint, that makes it very difficult. We'll just keep it simple. And then fixed fee is exactly what you think it is. It is a fixed number. It is a stipulated sum, as they call it in the commercial world. I'm going to build your house for $500,000. If I make money on it, I make money on it. If I don't, I don't. That's where my fee's coming in. The numbers that I come in with to build your roof and your framing, that's my numbers, my subcontractors. I understand that I've got a fee built into that, but if it ends up going over because of my bad numbers, then that's my problem. But hopefully at the end of the day, in the allowance items, I'm going to prevail more on certain things than others and make some money off of it. Those are really the two main ways to do it. And under both scenarios, the structure is to send draw requests periodically. When I'm representing a builder, I encourage them to do it at least monthly so it doesn't get out of hand, even if it's a very small amount, to be very consistent. From an owner's perspective, I don't want to see it every week or every 2 weeks. That's a little too much. I mean, especially if we're dealing with a bank and we're having to go through red tape to get funding every time. But in the residential world, your subcontractors get paid weekly. So when an owner gets a draw request, it's critical that if they agree with it, they need to let the bank know immediately so it gets funded so the builder can get those subcontractors paid, because when your subcontractors start getting lag in payment, they may not walk off the job, but they may not bring their A game either, and they may not staff it the way they probably should if they're getting paid timely.
And I know, like, on any of these contracts, whether it's a fixed fee or a cost plus, you say, on cost plus, it might go up to 16 or 17% at the most, but that's not sheer profit to the builder because they've got to pay their GCs and things like that out of that, right?
That's correct. And I often tell builders, don't call that your profit, because that's not truly your profit. I mean, there are certain things that may not get passed along to the consumer, the owner, with regards to certain line items in the budget. You have superintendents on larger projects. You have other costs that you may end up carrying yourself that you don't allocate to the homeowners? Absolutely, that's true.
Yeah, like your administrative costs and things like that are not going to be passed along, right?
Right. And you've got to amortize those across the various jobs that you have. I mean, with the commercial general liability policy, it covers all of your jobs, would be allocated over all of the projects. Some builders use a line item for that. Others build that into their what you'd call overhead and profit. So that's very true. True.
And that brings up another topic that I've heard you always insist upon is builders have to do strict accounting if they have multiple custom projects going so that they don't ever mix up, one customer's money with another project or vice versa.
There's a statute called the Texas Trust Funds Act. And essentially, the bottom line of that is the money that an owner pays to a builder is for the benefit of the subcontractors and the suppliers who do the work and provide the materials. The money left over or designated as the builder's fee is the builder's fee. So it is very critical for builders to keep that very clear and very separate to the extent that they don't commingle funds. And if they make a mistake and pay a bill on one project for money on the other, that they do constant audits to make sure that they catch those kind of things. I had a case where the owner made trust fund violation claims against the builder, and the builder had fantastic books. There was only 2 instances where they had made a mistake and paid out of the wrong account, and they had fixed the problem within a week. Not all builders are that fortunate or that diligent about it. And I have seen just a large increase in volume of cases of what I call accounting cases, where owners feel like the builder's not accounting for things properly. I mean, it comes up when it's costing too much, it's costing more than they thought it would. They want to know where the money's going. They don't feel comfortable that it's going to their project or it's going to their house, and they start asking questions. And when a builder says, no, you can't see my books, or shows them books that are very unorganized and very confusing, it raises a red flag to the owner. Then they go get a lawyer, and then it becomes much more difficult. They get a CPA involved, and you've built this beautiful house, but now you're being alleged of commingling of trust funds. And because you don't have good books, it's going to take a long time to solve that problem. The other gotcha on that is that it seems that district attorneys, even though they have really bad crimes to prosecute, seem to have found some interest in these type of cases. I've heard more and more stories of where you can be charged with a crime under that statute. Obviously, if you're stealing, then that's a different story altogether, but a technical violation of that statute, if proven, can be a misdemeanor. So it's critical for builders to watch this, but also for owners to understand. And I think an open line of communication in your cost plus contracts, you get the invoices. And I preach to builders, I say, if you do a draw request and it doesn't have an invoice, make sure you get that backup invoice to the owner as soon as you can. So they get to see all of this up front. So it doesn't show up 10 months later where they're questioning something and they're like, where's this invoice? I haven't seen it. And for both parties, a clear chain of communication. I know a lot of builders are starting to use software programs where you can share everything from photographs to change orders to invoices to documents that's all housed in one place that everybody has access to and can see, and hopefully avoid those cases. But if you ask me what's my number one increase in cases, those are it.
Speaking of software, I know you've mentioned in one of the courses you taught about both parties should be careful about their text messages.
I can't stress that enough. I'll give you a couple of examples. One was really interesting. I had a case in West Texas, and it was a small case. And one of the complaints that the homeowner had was, you're not responding to me, you're not communicating with me. But the homeowner went and subpoenaed her text messages, and they had several strings that were pretty darn long. When they printed them out, it was 325 pages, and it proved the exact opposite. I've got home builder sending text message to homeowner at 11:35 on a Friday night, and evidence that they had a subcontractor at the house the next morning at 7 a.m. Now, obviously, you could prove the negative as well as the positive. The other thing that, and this comes from a family law seminar, be very careful about what you put in a text message. If you put a thumbs up, there was a particular family law case that said someone agreed to increase their child support payment with a thumbs up. Now, obviously, there's a little more context to that, but that was kind of the end of the conversation. Was the last thing was a thumbs up. And I thought, wow, you've got to be really, really careful what you do on text messages. And, in construction, as you and I both know, that's kind of the mode of operation is typically text messages. Emails are not as prevalent. Sometimes they can be, but in field, day in, day out is all text messages. For both parties, you got to keep those phones. If you don't, you can subpoena text messages, and they keep those forever because it takes very little to store text messages. Obviously, emails are tremendously more, especially with attachments and things like that. But simple text messages are very little storage, so the phone companies keep those forever. And anything after midnight, just don't send it. Just don't send it.
Let's talk a little bit about warranties and what people should look for in the language about warranties.
In the residential world, the warranty is somewhat like the express warranty when you get an automobile. It covers a lot, but there's a lot of exclusions, and there are a lot of things that we talk about new homeowners. Some of the maintenance items that are in the warranties, may seem to be a little excessive, but they're instructional. Things about keeping moisture even around your foundation and making sure that your gutters are cleaned out and making sure that you have positive drainage away from your house and things like that are homeowners' responsibilities are kind of spelled out in those warranties. But as we also talked about previously, you have the tolerances for the various items. So if you see a sheetrock crack in your trim and it's December and it's 10 degrees and the humidity's 0, don't panic. It's okay. You'll see things like nail pops and those kind of things in the first year or two. Those are normal. Those happen. If you have a 45-degree crack coming out of a trim and a door frame and the door's sticking, that's a little bit different. One of the things I'll talk about is the production home builders after the TRCC seem to kind of grab on to the idea of education, of having classes of before you move into your house, hey, here are some things that are going to happen in the first year. Here are some of the things that you need to look for. Here's some of the things you need to do as a first-time homeowner to make sure that these kind of problems don't come up. And I thought, to a certain extent, they were relatively successful. I know that custom home builders kind of have a more informal process to go through, kind of like an automobile, instead of an hour walkthrough of talking about all the things it does a day or an afternoon at least. Give you a notebook with all the manuals for everything at closing, along with the garage door openers and those kind of things, and be able to have interaction about, any questions with regards to all this complicated smart house stuff these days. Yeah. Can get quite cumbersome and difficult, and to have those conversations early instead of 2 months into the process at 3 a.m, I can't get my lights to turn on because I don't know what happened to this default in the system. So those kind of things are current. I mean, that's what we're having to deal with. The builder puts in these smart systems, but they're not computer experts, and the owners aren't either. So the manufacturer warranties here are very important. And owners need to understand that when you buy the house and move in, all of those manufacturer warranties are yours. All of those are transferred to you. So you have every manufacturer warranty that the builder has obtained, including the roof warranty and anything else. So one thing you want to make sure is that if you don't get a whole lot of documentation when you close, start asking some questions. Where's my roof warranty? Where's my air conditioning warranty? Those kind of things to make sure you have those. And it could very simply be they just got left out by accident or someone was in a hurry. But make sure you get those because those are extremely helpful. The garage door warranty is the one I can think of most prevalently in a couple of situations where as soon as they contacted the garage door company, said, yep, it's in warranty, we'll be out and we'll fix it. I didn't even have to get into a fight with the builder over it.
It sounds like communication and organization on the part of the builder is really something that you should look for in deciding who you're going to build your house with.
I think that's absolutely correct. We talk about, tests in the relationship as you go through the process. If you're having problems on the front end trying to get the plans right and it's taken 3 or 4 times, that might be a red flag. And on the same token with the builder and the homeowner, if they keep changing their mind or they want to completely change the contract, these are good tests to figure out whether y'all are going to be a good fit or not. Some people just aren't. And, we've talked about this before, that folks from outside of Texas have a little bit different expectations and a little bit different way to communicate. So from a builder's perspective, you're being challenged on how you go through the process and how you sell the product, and just kind of have to adopt to that. But the more is better. Some of the folks from California seem to ask a lot more questions, and in a way, that's really good. That way you can manage expectations. The person who just comes in, meets a couple times, signs the contract, and you start building for, that's the one you're probably going to have to worry about, because they're just not going to understand it, and you're not going to understand them.
Let's talk a little bit about builder insurance and also the subcontractor agreements that your builder should have in place.
Well, builders, for the most part, don't really build anything. They're really managers. They're construction managers. They hire subcontractors to do the work. Builders should have a commercial general liability policy, and they should have subcontract agreements with the majority of their subcontractors. Reality is there's certain smaller trades that it's just not going to be realistic to happen. But with your larger trades, framer, concrete, roofer, tile, big ticket items, you need to make sure that they have a subcontract agreement. And I'd be asking questions of, do they have insurance? Do the subcontractors have insurance? Do they have the appropriate amount of insurance? You might go as far as to ask to see certificates of insurance. Now, those are not gold standards. The Supreme Court once said they're not worth the paper they're written on, because that doesn't necessarily mean they actually have insurance, because you can make one of those up, and I've seen that. I've seen Ford COIs before, unbelievably so. But so to confirm that they do have the appropriate insurance, because when it comes time to have a claim, you want to make sure that there's somebody who's going to pay for it. A lot of subcontractors don't have a whole lot of money, work out of their house. In Texas, you have some pretty extensive homestead exemption rules and exempt property. So if there's a problem with a subcontractor and they've made a mistake and they don't have insurance, then it's probably not going to be a good situation. Sometimes you can make a claim on your homeowner's policy and they'll cover it, and they'll go after the subcontractor and take the risk. But if they don't, that could be a real problem. So insurance is important, and you just can't assume that they have it either, because it's not required. Workers' comp's not required in Texas, the only state in the country that doesn't require it. You're typically not going to get it on residential. If you do, you're going to be paying for it out of your pocket. Most builders don't have it either. But commercial general liability is something they should have. If it's a really big house or a really sophisticated project, you might want to go as far as to say, not only do I want to know that you have commercial general liability insurance, I want to know what your exclusions are, or what they call today endorsements, to make sure that there's some coverage there.
Is there a certain set of rules, extra rules, maybe if a person is building inside of an HOA?
There is, and they seem to become longer and longer, and truly will be more complicated the higher the price point of the house. Most HOAs are going to have an architectural control committee, which they're going to want to see the plans. They're going to want to review the plans. They may have certain building standards with regards to everything from color of the exterior of the house to the theme of the house. Certain subdivisions, want it to look a certain way. Landscaping, they're going to want to see those things. Sometimes they'll want to see the foundation plan. They're not going to own anything, but they're going to review everything. They may have comments back. So it's another layer of inspection and some control. Sometimes it goes way overboard. But one thing that when I do represent owners is I want to make sure the builder has built in that subdivision before and is very well aware of what the requirements are, because those HOAs can be a little bit political. And it's helpful to have been through the process a few times to understand what are their hot button issues. What in the rules are they really going to clamp down on, enforce? What are the neighbors complaining about in the subdivision that the HOA is sensitive to? Those things do govern that decision process. And, from a builder's perspective, it's important for the builder, before they build the first house in there, to sit down with the Architectural Control Committee, sit down with the board of the HOA and talk through what are the things that you're really looking for. What are you really concerned about? I can read your document all day long, but really tell me what it is that people are hypersensitive about. What are, from an overall look of the subdivision, the kind of things you're looking for, those sorts of things, to make sure that you don't end up having a stumbling block. The contracts are going to say essentially that the owner is ultimately responsible for getting the approval from the ACC and the HOA, but the builder will assist and participate and help in the process. And if you're the owner hiring the builder in the subdivision where the builder has built 5 homes, you hope that that's going to be a collaborative process. And if an issue does come up, that the builder is going to be your advocate to try to get it approved through the homeowners association.
I also wanted to ask about, you've gone through everything, you've signed the contract. We've all heard the stories that the media loves to jump on about builders that walk the contract, basically. Can they do that?
There is a termination convenience provision in contracts, in the custom contracts, so they can. But the one that the Star Telegram here in Fort Worth really focused on was a unique situation where the builder was building a custom project for a homeowner, but they were building it on the builder's lot. So they still had ownership of the property until the end. So when they terminated for convenience and gave the money back, they were able to sell the house to someone else for a whole lot more money. And during that period of time, prices were spiking. In contrast, the termination for convenience that are in the custom contracts when you're building on an owner's lot is simply to give the builder the option that if I've tried everything else I can to try to get this house done and I just can't do it, it gives them the option to terminate. Now, obviously, it's on the owner's lot. It's the owner's property. The owner can go hire another builder to finish out the project, but it is the nuclear option, and there's some risk involved from the builder. Obviously, the builder is going to lose out on the rest of the profit and benefit they get from finishing that house. They may get a negative opinion because they're building other houses in there and word travels fast. But yes, that is something that's in the contracts. That's something that gets used, but again, as a last resort.
Well, I really want to thank you for taking the time to talk to us today, Matt. Really what you need to look for in a builder is a builder that is organized and knows how to communicate. And you're going to find that in the interview process. And certainly if you start down the path of bidding and design decisions and that too. So that's important that you do your careful homework and choose wisely.
And I would also add, go look at some of their homes. Go look at their work product. That will really help guide you in what they do and the price point that they build. And that way you know that they're qualified to build your house.
Well, I just want to thank you for being here with us today, and we appreciate all the great information.
You're welcome. Thank you for the time and enjoyed it, and happy to do this anytime you want to have another podcast.